Imagine walking through the Manchester Arndale Centre on a busy Saturday afternoon in January 2026. For 15 solid years, one restaurant unit on the concourse had been a reliable beacon of movement and colour, operating as a permanent fixture of the local retail landscape. Diners sat shoulder to shoulder on elevated stools, watching brightly coloured bowls of raw fish glide past them on a mechanical belt. But suddenly, a stark sign sitting out front simply read that they were closing soon, accompanied by a small QR code redirecting confused customers to a generic guide to find their next nearest location. The brand simply executed a quiet exit from one of the most profitable and highly trafficked shopping centres in the United Kingdom. Just months prior, the brand also abruptly shuttered its landmark location on Jubilee Street in Brighton. Same thing with the branches in Cambridge and Glasgow, closing their doors with zero warning to the local customer base. For the millions of Brits who grew up viewing the restaurant as the pinnacle of exotic high-tech dining, the rapid disappearance of these landmark locations felt like a glitch in the retail matrix. But unbeknownst to the broader public, the business was bleeding cash on the high street at an unsustainable rate. The sushi chain reported a staggering pre-tax loss of £22.6 million in the year leading up to March 2024, despite generating a seemingly healthy turnover of £138.3 million. This is the story of why Yo Sushi is dying on the British High Street, and how the company orchestrated a brilliant, ruthless pivot to save itself by infiltrating the local supermarket. Let's rewind the clock to 1997. The British dining landscape was a different beast where sushi suffered from a severe image problem. For the average person in Britain at that time, eating raw fish was an intimidating, elitist curiosity confined to hushed, obscenely expensive dining rooms tucked away in London's financial districts. Taking a gamble on a plate of sashimi for a casual Friday night dinner was unheard of for the wider public. That paradigm shattered when founder Simon Woodruff opened the doors to the first Yo Sushi on Poland Street in Soho. Coming from a background as a stage designer for rock bands, Woodruff approached hospitality like a theatrical production. He imported the Japanese kaiten sushi model, literally translating to conveyor belt sushi, and weaponized it for a European audience desperate for something fresh and exciting. He essentially took the traditional friction points of dining out and threw them straight in the bin to create a totally gamified restaurant experience. A customer could bypass the awkwardness of flagging down a waiter, deciphering a complex foreign menu, or worrying about mispronouncing a dish in front of their date. You simply walked in, grabbed a high stool, and watched a mechanical river of freshly prepared food glide right past your face before grabbing whatever caught your eye. The atmosphere inside that original site was intentionally overwhelming and brilliantly chaotic. Bathed in futuristic neon lighting, the space featured airline-style call buttons to summon staff alongside robotic drink trolleys rolling down the aisles to deliver Japanese beer directly to the seats. The entire setup felt much closer to a ride at a culinary theme park than a traditional restaurant. This highly curated environment perfectly captured the zeitgeist of the late 90s Cool Britannia era, drawing crowds eager to participate in an incredibly trendy, modern cultural event. The concept became an overnight sensation, and as a result, the company expanded aggressively out of London by snapping up prime real estate in major cities and sprawling shopping centres across the country. The bright orange logo and the mechanical conveyor belt became synonymous with a modern, contemporary lifestyle. Yet, beneath the flashing lights and the spinning plates, a fundamental operational flaw was already baked into the concrete. The very mechanism that made the brand famous was quietly acting as a financial time bomb, waiting to tear the entire business model apart from the inside. In the hospitality industry, square footage serves as the absolute most expensive asset on any balance sheet, meaning every inch of floor space must generate consistent revenue to justify exorbitant commercial rents in premium locations like central London or the Manchester Arndale. While a traditional restaurant layout maximizes this vital seating density by utilizing flexible furniture that managers can easily push together for a large birthday party or slide apart for couples, the kaiten model destroys this flexibility entirely. A conveyor belt operates as a huge, inflexible piece of industrial machinery that dictates the entire architectural footprint of the unit from the very second the concrete is poured. Because the physical mechanics of a continuous loop require a vast amount of dedicated space simply to turn corners and house hidden motors, the belt creates permanent physical barriers running straight through the middle of the dining room. As a result, staff are forced to navigate around them while customers are locked into fixed, rigid seating arrangements. This structural inflexibility turned into a liability as commercial property rates and business taxes across the UK climbed relentlessly throughout the 2000s and 2010s, eventually making the heavy financial burden of housing that giant mechanical loop impossible for corporate accountants to justify. But the financial drain didn't stop there, as the mechanical belt engineered a daily logistical nightmare for the kitchen staff working behind the scenes. In a standard table service setup, a chef cooks a specific meal only after a customer actively places an order, an efficient method that guarantees exact portion control and keeps food waste to an absolute minimum. Meanwhile, a conveyor belt operates on pure anticipation. The kitchen team has to blindly guess on what a room full of strangers might want to eat and proactively load the belt to ensure it looks vibrant, colorful, and appealing. Because an empty belt immediately signals a failing restaurant to anyone walking past the window, the chefs are forced to constantly pump out dishes regardless of actual customer demand. This anticipatory cooking creates a massive vulnerability when dealing with highly perishable ingredients. If a chef prepares 20 plates of premium salmon sashimi, but the dining room happens to be filled with customers who crave hot chicken katsu, those 20 plates of expensive raw fish will simply rotate continuously on the belt. And since food safety regulations dictate strict time limits for raw seafood sitting out in a warm dining room, those plates must be thrown directly in the bin the second that timer runs out. The physical mechanics of the restaurant practically mandate a staggering percentage of food waste just to keep the display looking attractive, and tossing premium ingredients into the trash at the end of every single night is a guaranteed path to financial ruin for any business operating on razor-thin profit margins. For over a decade, the sheer volume of early customer demand masked those hidden logistical costs. Yes, the mechanical belts were expensive to maintain and generated lots of waste, but there were simply enough people walking through the doors to make the math work. Driving this momentum was Chief Executive Robin Rowland, who took the helm in 1999 and cultivated a brand identity he famously described as the chief happiness maker of the restaurant sector. Rowland recognized that the conveyor belt functioned perfectly as a transit hub utility. He expanded the brand's footprint into major transport locations, launching an 11,800 square foot site at Gatwick Airport's North Terminal, alongside highly profitable outposts at London Waterloo, Heathrow Terminal 3, and London Stansted, where travellers are inherently rushed, and the ability to sit down, grab a plate of food without waiting to order, and leave 10 minutes later provided a competitive advantage in a busy departure lounge. The company appeared unstoppable, drawing heavy private equity backing from Quilvest before eventually securing an £81 million buyout from Mayfair Equity Partners. But entering the late 2010s, Yo Sushi found itself trapped in a brutal pincer movement orchestrated by two different types of competitors. At the premium end, they faced the aggressive rise of fast casual Asian dining spearheaded by Wagamama. This rival offered a sleeker, more mature dining experience with a comprehensive menu of hot food and highly efficient table service, directly threatening Yo's evening dinner crowd. Simultaneously, the brand was hemorrhaging its core lunchtime demographic to the explosive growth of grab-and-go takeaway operations like Itsu and Wasabi. These newer chains utilized a ruthless focus on high volume and low overhead, bypassing the need for massive dining rooms or expensive mechanical infrastructure. They simply packed fresh sushi into plastic trays, stacked them in brightly lit fridges, and processed customers through the till in under 60 seconds. Paying a premium to sit at a conveyor belt suddenly felt like an unjustifiable luxury for a standard Tuesday lunch break, especially when you could walk next door and buy a bento box for half the price. Desperate to maintain relevance, Yo Sushi began mutating the menu far beyond the original concept of simple raw fish and rice. They threw wild culinary concepts at the wall to see what would stick, and in June 2013, they rolled out the Yo Burger across all 65 of their UK restaurants, replacing traditional bread buns with toasted Japanese rice patties stuffed with teriyaki chicken and tilapia katsu, which severely complicated an already strained kitchen workflow. Compounding this operational chaos was increasing government pressure regarding public health. In 2011, Yo Sushi became one of the first major national chains to voluntarily pledge to display calorie counts directly on their menus, introducing a substantial psychological friction point for the actual diner. The entire appeal of the conveyor belt was built on mindless, impulsive indulgence. Forcing a customer to stare at the exact caloric impact of grabbing 4 plates of deep-fried chicken katsu shattered that illusion, actively discouraging the exact impulsive purchasing behavior the restaurant relied on to survive. All this, coupled with the British high street slowly turning into a hostile environment of rising rents, led to their private equity backers at Mayfair Equity Partners recognizing that the brand had hit a rigid ceiling in the UK. Opening another flashy dining room in Birmingham or inventing another novelty burger would never generate the financial returns required to justify their investment. So, to secure sustainable long-term growth, the board directed their capital squarely toward North America. In November 2017, the board brought in Richard Hodgson, the former boss of Pizza Express, to take over as the new CEO. His mandate was crystal clear from day one: lead an aggressive international expansion strategy to reduce the company's heavy reliance on the struggling British operation. Just weeks after Hodgson stepped into the role, the company pulled off a blockbuster financial move by acquiring Bento Sushi, the second largest sushi brand in North America, for a staggering £59.2 million. But Bento Sushi operated on a fundamentally different wavelength than the traditional Yo brand. They ignored flashy neon lights, robotic drink trolleys, and mechanical conveyor belts, as Bento functioned as an incredibly efficient, high-volume logistics machine. They supplied over 1,700 partner sites by strategically placing small, unassuming sushi kiosks directly inside Canadian and American supermarkets, corporate dining facilities, and crowded university campuses. The UK executives were suddenly exposed to the sheer, unparalleled profitability of the grocery kiosk business model. They looked at the spreadsheets and realized that selling fresh sushi from a tiny 10-foot counter tucked inside a supermarket required a mere fraction of the suffocating overhead costs associated with running a 70-seater restaurant in a prime city center. There were no dining rooms to heat, no complex mechanical belts to constantly repair, and no expensive front-of-house staff to manage. The host supermarket automatically handled all the daily foot traffic, the security, and the facility costs. But executing that pivot in the United Kingdom presented an immediate hurdle. Yo Sushi possessed absolutely zero domestic manufacturing infrastructure capable of supplying a national supermarket chain. Building a nationwide food distribution network from scratch requires years of securing specialized factories, establishing complex cold chain logistics, and navigating incredibly strict food safety regulations. So rather than burning through time and capital trying to build that network, the corporate office decided to simply buy their way into the market. In April 2018, they acquired Taiko Foods for an undisclosed sum, and Taiko operated as an absolute powerhouse within the British manufacturing sector. Founded in 1997, they were the very first manufacturer to successfully supply packaged sushi to UK supermarkets, and had spent 2 decades perfecting their operations as a major supplier of premium food-to-go products for Waitrose. By purchasing Taiko, Yo instantly acquired a hyper-efficient manufacturing supply chain already perfectly tuned for the rigorous, high-volume demands of the British grocery market. This move effectively bypassed the grueling logistical challenges of retail distribution, allowing Yo to march straight to the headquarters of the biggest retailer in the country to pitch their new version. In October 2018, the brand signed a landmark commercial agreement to pilot manned sushi counters directly inside Tesco Extra superstores. The strategy was simple. Install small kiosks where chefs prepare food right in front of shoppers, effectively condensing the theatrical restaurant experience and dropping it straight into the grocery aisle. Following successful initial trials at the Sunbury-on-Thames and Bournemouth locations, the company realized they'd perfectly bridged the gap between their premium high street brand recognition and the guaranteed daily foot traffic of the British supermarket sector. With the proof of concept secured, the retail expansion became relentless. The company quickly rolled out these manned sushi counters to 50 Tesco stores nationwide before eventually pushing the footprint well past the 300 store mark. They also broadened their reach beyond the superstores by targeting the convenience market, securing a partnership with the Co-op to supply pre-packaged Yo-to-Go products across 160 local branches. They even flooded Sainsbury's fridges in over 300 locations with branded crispy salmon rolls, vegan sushi boxes, and poke bowls. On top of all that, Yo leveraged their high street brand equity to stock supermarket condiment aisles with proprietary Yo sauces and marinades. So, with the retail division printing money, corporate executives looked back at the legacy restaurants and realized they were done tolerating the mechanical loop. There's no place for sentimentality in the face of rising costs and shrinking profits. In 2019, the company debuted a new format called Yo Kitchen inside the Westfield London shopping centre. The designers opted for shared wooden tables and family-friendly booths, serving a broader menu delivered directly by waitstaff. Chief executive Richard Hodgson explicitly told the press that the company was no longer wedded to one format, describing the new food offering as simply Japanese-ish. This beltless philosophy quickly spread to the very transit hubs that had fueled their early expansion. At the Manchester Piccadilly station, the company removed the chitin machinery and converted the site into an express grab-and-go format. Rushed travelers dragging suitcases lacked the time to sit at a mechanical counter, so management installed huge fridges filled with pre-packaged sushi to compete directly with rival brands like Wasabi. Just as management was physically dismantling the theater of the open dining room, the global COVID-19 pandemic arrived in March 2020 and served as the ultimate executioner. Government-mandated closures left the company holding a massive portfolio of highly expensive real estate physically designed for communal dining. When the hospitality sector was eventually permitted to reopen, heightened sanitization protocols rendered the open-air conveyor belt obsolete. The company was forced to keep the machinery permanently switched off. Customers were subjected to sitting next to a stationary metal track, scanning a QR code, and waiting for table service. This emergency pivot fundamentally broke the customer experience, stripping away the impulsivity of grabbing a plate instantly. In September 2020, creditors officially approved a company voluntary arrangement, a harsh legal mechanism that allowed the struggling business to aggressively renegotiate commercial rents and permanently shutter unprofitable restaurants in a single stroke, cutting hundreds of jobs. The whole pandemic situation forced the board to admit that their high street footprint was a deeply flawed financial model, and the physical restaurants were a definitive liability, fully eclipsed by the retail division quietly printing money in the background. The permanent shift away from the physical dining room coincided directly with big changes happening far above the restaurant level. While the UK high street presence shrank, the grocery kiosk strategy proved so incredibly lucrative that it triggered an international buying spree. Backed by private equity money, the parent company made their biggest move yet by acquiring Snow Fox, the third largest sushi kiosk operator in the United States. This American business was so unbelievably big that it generated the vast majority of the combined company's overall revenue. The scale was so dominant that the board made a radical decision in 2021 to rename the entire overarching parent company to the Snow Fox Group. Just like that, the quirky British restaurant chain that started in Soho was demoted to a minor regional subsidiary sitting underneath an umbrella focused on moving over 60 million trays of packaged sushi every single year. Now, operating that sheer volume inevitably attracts the attention of global industry giants. In the summer of 2023, Zensho Holdings, one of Japan's most powerful food service conglomerates, swooped in and executed a blockbuster takeover of the Snowfox Group valued at roughly £500 million. Following this cash acquisition, the Japanese owners overhauled the corporate structure one more time in July 2024, rebranding the entire holding company to the Wonderfield Group. This new entity consolidated a terrifying portfolio of market-leading retail brands under a single roof. The 1990s startup officially morphed into a quiet empire employing over 5,500 people and supplying thousands of supermarkets across 16 different countries. This sprawling corporate ladder explains exactly why the legacy high street restaurants are being allowed to die a quiet death. Supermarket kiosks generate huge, low-risk, high-volume revenue with minimal overhead. In stark contrast, the legacy UK dining rooms continue to hemorrhage cash through exorbitant commercial rents, complex mechanical maintenance, and unpredictable staffing issues. The corporate board is ruthlessly applying a fast food logistical blueprint to a brand that used to pride itself on theatrical dining. The company is actively executing a managed decline of its traditional footprint, and whenever a commercial lease comes up for renewal or a location starts dragging down regional profit margins, the executives simply shutter the doors, rip down the bright orange signing, and redirect the saved capital straight into their global retail expansion. The physical restaurants successfully served their ultimate purpose over the last 2 decades by building the initial brand equity and normalizing the concept of eating raw fish for the general public. But today, holding on to those expensive high street locations is simply a terrible investment for a global conglomerate that has perfected the art of printing money inside grocery stores. The era of sitting around a neon-lit conveyor belt is rapidly fading into pure nostalgia. The brand has decisively chosen the ruthless, highly profitable efficiency of the global supply chain over the theatricality and warmth of the dining experience. The magic of the kaiten sushi model has been permanently traded for the convenience of the grocery store fridge. But what do you all reckon? Will the supermarket kiosk model dominate the future of fast casual sushi, or are people still going to crave that unique theatrical restaurant experience? Drop your thoughts in the comments section below. I genuinely love reading around 99% of them. And anyways, if you enjoyed this deep dive, give us a like, hit subscribe, and ring that bell so you don't miss the next one. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching and stay curious.